Usually when you look up at the night sky, there is this fundamental expectation of immediate reality.
Right, it feels entirely present, like it's just happening right now.
Exactly. I mean, you see a constellation, and your brain automatically processes it as a single unified object. It's just hanging there in the dark all at once.
Yeah, it is a very compelling illusion. I mean, we are hardwired to trust our visual field as this real-time monitor of our environment. But when you apply even basic astrophysics to that visual field, the image completely shatters.
Oh, wow, right, because of the light delay?
Exactly. That star on the left edge of the constellation. Well, the light hitting your retina actually left that star 10 years ago, and the one on the right might be from 1,000 years ago.
So you weren't looking at a unified object at all?
No, not even close. You're looking at a temporal collage, completely different eras of the universe overlapping in your eye at the exact same millisecond.
And that gap, that massive chasm between the unified picture we construct in our heads and the delayed physical reality actually hitting our eyes, well, that's the entire foundation of what we're unpacking today.
It really is. It's such a fascinating topic.
Yeah, so today we are taking a deep dive into a very specific, deeply provocative body of work called Draft, Mr. Einstein's Slacking. And specifically, we're focusing heavily on the 157th entry in this series.
Right, the 157th entry is really the crux of it.
Yeah, the author, who goes by the handle Zyna2023, is essentially attempting to dismantle modern theoretical physics. And they are doing it by pulling from, of all things, French psychoanalysis. Plus, we actually have a summarized version of the author's core thesis that's simplified so well, honestly, a 12-year-old could understand it.
Which is incredibly helpful because the source material gets dense. But it's a radical synthesis of disciplines. In this 157th post, the author makes the argument that for the past century, theoretical physicists, and that very much includes Albert Einstein, have fundamentally confused the mathematical map for the physical territory.
Wait, really? 100 years of physics just, confusing the map for the territory?
That's the claim. They argue that physics has lost its grounding in physical reality because it refuses to respect the absolute limits of the camera eye perspective.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the author is using psychoanalysis to debunk relativity, which sounds wild. I read the source material, and they lean really heavily on Jacques Lacan's 3 orders of reality. That's the symbolic, the imaginary, and the real.
Right, Lacan's triad.
Yeah. So how exactly does a psychological framework map onto the hard math of theoretical physics?
Well, it maps surprisingly well when you realize that physics is, at its core, an exercise in epistemology. How we know what we know. Lacan's framework gives the author a vocabulary to categorize how physicists actually process data.
Okay, so walk me through the 3 worlds. Let's start with the symbolic.
Sure. So for Lacan, the symbolic is the realm of abstract structures, language, and rules. In the context of this 157th post, the author defines the symbolic as the mathematical universe.
Like literally the math itself.
Exactly. It is the Cartesian coordinate system. It's the periodic table where we reduce a highly complex physical element down to just the letter U for uranium.
Right. So it's the algebraic grid, the formulas on the chalkboard that dictate how the universe should behave on paper.
Yeah, exactly. It's a structural matrix.
Right.
But then we have Lacan's imaginary order. And this isn't just, imagination in the sense of making things up.
Right. It's more literal than that.
Yeah, the imaginary is the realm of visualization and perceived form. The author actually uses this brilliant historical example of Albrecht Dürer's perspective drawings.
Oh, yeah, the Renaissance artist.
Right. Dürer mastered the mathematical technique of projecting a 3-dimensional room onto a flat 2-dimensional plane. He created a perfect visual illusion. So in physics, the imaginary is when you take that pure mathematical data from the symbolic grid and you construct a mental or visual model.
So it's like the picture of the atom you hold in your head or the static constellation you draw between stars.
Exactly. The math provides the coordinates, and our brains connect the dots to create a visualization. But neither of those things are the physical universe itself.
Right, which brings us to Lacan's 3rd category, which is the real.
And this is where the author's critique truly begins. Because for Zyna2023, the real is not a concept, and it is definitely not a calculation.
That's physical.
Completely.
Wow.
The real is the raw, unyielding physical interaction. Crucially, the author defines the real as the precise physical moment of impact. It's the exact millisecond a photon of light crashes into the physical matter of your retina or, say, the glass lens of a camera. The real is the interaction at time 0.
Okay, I want to make sure we are drawing a hard line between these three because the author's entire thesis in the 157th post really hinges on physicists mixing them up.
It absolutely does.
So if I think about it like baking, the symbolic is the written recipe, right? The abstract ratios of flour to sugar. The imaginary is me picturing the delicious finished cake in my head, but the real is the actual physical weight of the cake on my tongue, the physical sensation.
That is the perfect distinction. I mean, you cannot eat the recipe.
Right.
And the central accusation of post-157 is that modern theoretical physicists have essentially moved into the recipe book. They have become so entranced by the elegance of their symbolic mathematics and their imaginary visualizations that they have, well, completely abandoned the real physical world.
But hold on, if the math works, why does it actually matter? I mean, math is how we landed rovers on Mars. Why is getting trapped in the symbolic order so dangerous for our understanding of physics?
Because the pure mathematical grid, that pristine, omnipotent Cartesian XYZ graph, inherently ignores the physical reality of information delay.
Wait, are we talking about the speed of light here? Because Einstein built special relativity explicitly on the premise that the speed of light is constant and finite. I mean, physicists definitely know light takes time to travel.
Right, they know it conceptually. But the author argues they fail to implement it structurally in their models. And this is where the concept of the God's perspective versus the camera perspective really comes into play.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. So when a physicist uses a Cartesian grid, they are adopting a God's perspective. They imagine themselves hovering outside of the universe, looking down at the entire infinite grid all at once.
Like an overseer?
Yeah. And if an event happens at coordinate A and another event happens at coordinate B, the grid registers both events as happening at a universal now.
I see the disconnect. In a mathematical equation, you can declare that two things happen simultaneously on opposite sides of the universe. The paper allows for it.
Exactly. The paper allows for it. But physical reality does not. In the real world, you are restricted to the camera perspective. A camera or a human observer can only ever know one absolute truth.
Which is the moment the light hits the lens.
Yes, the exact moment a photon hit its lens and the angle it came from. Because all information in the universe is carried by light, and light has a speed limit, everything you observe is delayed.
So there is no universal now?
None at all. You cannot look out at the universe and see a universal now. You are only ever seeing the delayed mail arriving.
Right. It's the classic lightning and thunder scenario, but applied to a cosmic scale. The visual flash and the audio rumble are the same event, but the information arrives at different times depending on your distance.
That's a great way to put it.
And so the author is saying physicists are pretending they can stand outside the storm and see the lightning and hear the thunder simultaneously. But doesn't the math help us see the bigger picture? Why is the God's eye view so wrong?
Well, this actually connects perfectly to that 12-year-old summary analogy from the TED.
Oh, right. The summary says it's like a video game screen. In a modern video game engine, the whole map renders at once. If an explosion happens on the far side of the digital map, the game's code registers it instantly.
Exactly. This system has a God's eye view of the code.
But reality is like receiving a delayed letter in the mail.
Precisely. Reality relies on the physical postal service of photons. And Zioned 2023 argues that by taking delayed physical mail photons arriving at the camera lens and forcibly mapping them onto a mathematically instantaneous video game grid, physicists have broken their understanding of the universe.
Wow.
Yeah, they have introduced mathematical artifacts and called them physical laws.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting, because this isn't just some philosophical debate about how to draw a graph. The author claims this video game versus delayed mail mix-up actually breaks physics.
It does. It has huge implications.
Yeah, they claim it created one of the most famous concepts in modern physics, which is Lorentz contraction.
Yes. The 157th post really zeroes in on Lorentz contraction as the ultimate symptom of this disease.
Okay, for context, Lorentz contraction is the accepted relativistic phenomenon where an object, say a spaceship or a train, physically shortens in length the closer it gets to the speed of light relative to a stationary observer.
Right. It is a staple of sci-fi and physics textbooks everywhere. The idea that space itself compresses at high velocities.
And the author is claiming this doesn't actually happen.
What's fascinating here is how methodically the author deconstructs the illusion. The author argues that moving objects do not physically compress at all. The contraction is a purely mathematical illusion.
An illusion caused by what?
By physicists using what is called orthogonal projection to map delayed light onto their God's eye grid.
Okay, we definitely need to break down orthogonal projection. How does mapping delayed light onto a grid magically make a train look shorter?
Okay, let's visualize this scenario. Imagine a very long train moving past you at an incredibly high speed, close to the speed of light. In the real world, the camera perspective, you can only measure this train based on the photons hitting your retina.
Right.
Now, light from the front of the train and light from the back of the train take different amounts of time to reach you, depending on your physical distance from those 2 points.
Okay, because the back of the train is further away from me than the front of the train as it passes?
Right. Now, because the train is moving so fast, by the time the delayed photon from the back of the train finally hits your eye, the physical train has already moved significantly forward in space.
Ah, I see. So the light hitting my eye is a mixture of new light from the front and old light from the back. I'm basically receiving temporal fragments.
Exactly, you're getting fragments. Now, what does the physicist do with those fragments? They take that delayed, fractured light data, and they use orthogonal projection.
Which means...
It means they map those photons onto a rigid XYZ grid, dropping straight lines down to the axis, and they plot those points as if they exist in a simultaneous now.
Oh, wow. They ignore the delay.
Yes, they completely ignore the fact that the photon from the caboose is older than the photon from the engine.
So they treat the arrival time of the light as the actual physical location of the object at that exact moment.
Yes. And when you map old light from the back of a fast-moving object and new light from the front, and you pretend they represent the object at the exact same instant, well, the distance between those two plotted points is mathematically shorter than the actual physical object.
Oh my God. So the math spits out a shorter length. And instead of realizing, oh, we just mapped old visual data against new visual data, the physicist concludes the physical matter of the train must have compressed.
That is the core accusation of post-157. The Lorentz contraction isn't a physical deformation of space. It's just an artifact of forcing the camera perspective, the real, into the God's perspective, the symbolic. It's a mapping error.
That feels like a colossal oversight for the scientific community to make. I want to bring in the Wimbledon analogy from the text because it perfectly illustrates how smashing delayed information together creates terrible real-world decisions.
Oh, the Wimbledon analogy is fantastic.
Right. Imagine a referee sitting at center court trying to track the ball. But let's exaggerate the speed of light. Player 1 is close, so their visual light reaches the ref in 1 second. Player 2 is further back, so their light takes 3 seconds to reach the ref.
So the physical delay is different for both sources of information.
Right. Now, if the referee acts like an orthodox physicist, they will assume a God's eye view. They will look at the visual data hitting their eyes right now and assume both players are swinging their rackets at a universal now.
But they aren't.
Exactly. The ref is actually seeing player 1 from 1 second ago and player 2 from 3 seconds ago. If the ref tries to judge the sequence of events based on that simultaneous assumption, they're going to make a completely bad call about who hit the ball and when.
And that bad call is exactly what the author claims Einstein codified into relativity. By assuming a universal mathematical grid where everything can be projected simultaneously, rather than meticulously calculating the specific light delay from every individual point to a specific physical lens, physics just fell into a trap of optical illusions.
So what does this all mean for the future of physics? I mean, if the mathematical map is broken and orthogonal projection creates illusions of shrinking matter, how does the author suggest we actually fix it? We can't just abandon mathematics entirely, right?
No, the author isn't suggesting we abandon math at all, but rather that we completely invert our foundational geometry. We have to throw out the omniscient God's eye Cartesian space as our starting point. We just cannot start with the grid.
So we have to start with the camera lens.
Exactly. We must start at the absolute physical center of interaction, time zero, or phi equals 0. In the real world, the only unassailable truth is the exact moment a photon interacts with matter. So you place your physical observer at t equals 0.
Okay, and then what?
From that single point of impact, you reconstruct the universe working backward, using what astrophysicists call the past light cone.
So instead of a grid that exists everywhere at once, you are literally just building a map of delays.
Yes, a map of delays. If a photon hits your lens right now at t equals 0, you know the speed of light, so you calculate that 1 second ago at t-1. That photon was exactly 1 light second away from you. 2 seconds ago, it was 2 light seconds away.
That makes total sense.
You do not map where the object is now in some God's eye universe. You only map the geometric surface of delayed light converging on your specific physical location.
It centers the physical mailman, not the abstract zip code. This brings to mind the historical detail the author highlighted regarding James Bradley. This was the English astronomer back in the 1700s, long before Einstein.
Yes, Bradley's discovery of the aberration of starlight. It is a perfect example of operating in the real rather than the symbolic.
Right, because Bradley was trying to observe the exact position of stars. And he realized that because the Earth is physically moving through space as it orbits the sun, he couldn't just point his telescope straight up at a star, even if the star was directly overhead.
Because of the delay.
Exactly, because light takes time to travel down the tube of the telescope, and the telescope itself is moving. The light would hit the side of the tube before it ever reached the eyepiece.
Right, the physical motion of the observer changes the geometry of the arriving light.
So Bradley realized he had to slightly tilt his telescope forward in the direction the Earth was moving to allow the starlight to fall cleanly down to the lens. It's like if you are running in the rain, even if the rain is falling perfectly straight down, you have to tilt your umbrella forward because you are physically moving into the path of the drops. You have to lead the target.
Yes. And why does the author revere Bradley so much in this context? Because Bradley respected the delay. He understood that light is a physical object arriving at a physical moving lens over time.
He didn't rely on the symbolic idea of light dropping perfectly straight down.
No, he adjusted for the temporal delay and the physical motion. He acted purely from the camera perspective.
He didn't try to play God, he just tilted his telescope.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, for the listener, this is the desperate plea embedded in Post 157. The author is deeply frustrated with physics becoming what they describe as head-heavy or just book-smart.
Right, stuck in the theories.
Yeah, they are arguing that a century of the most brilliant minds on the planet got utterly seduced by their own beautiful, perfectly balanced mathematics. They retreated into Lacan's symbolic and imaginary orders, they fell in love with the recipe, and they completely forgot to eat the cake.
It is a profound paradigm shift. I mean, it requires you to stop looking down at a map spread across a table and forces you to look out from your own eyes, acknowledging the hidden timeline attached to everything you see.
It really is.
So let's summarize the journey we've taken today. We started with Jacques Lacan's psychoanalysis, and we used it to separate abstract math from physical light. Then we explored perspective that challenges the fundamental assumptions of Einstein's relativity by demanding we respect the male delay of the universe. And finally, we unpacked the mechanics of how relying on an instantaneous God's eye view might have tricked a century of physicists into believing Lorentz contraction is a physical shrinking of matter rather than just a mapping error.
It demands that we rebuild our understanding of reality, starting strictly from the physical point of impact, the camera eye at t=0. It's a total rejection of omniscient theory in favor of raw physical interaction.
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating lens through which to view not just astrophysics, but honestly our own daily lives.
It does. The author argues that brilliant physicists trap themselves in a symbolic mathematical matrix, simply forgetting the physical delay of reality. It makes you wonder, where else in your daily life are you confusing the symbolic map for the real territory?
Oh, that's a great question.
Right. Like when you look at a supposedly real-time stock chart or a live social media feed or a complex dashboard at work, are you tricking yourself into a God's eye view? Are you forgetting the hidden delays, the biases, and the physical distances between the actual event and the exact moment that information finally hits your eye?
We assume we are seeing the whole board instantly, but we are always just looking at ghosts. We are entirely at the mercy of the delay. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the map you're using to navigate your reality, and remember to always respect the delay.